Welcome to the Odyssey of a Former Fat Kid. I am your host and former fat kid, Brian Grizz Butler. Today, I'm joined by Andy DeSantis, or better known online as Andy DRD, the Kale Crusader, and the author of the weekly gut health journal or post, Fecal Fridays.
Love that stuff.
Yeah. Andy is an educator. He is a dietitian, and he is passionate about helping people improve their health through nutrition and education. Welcome, Andy. Thank you for taking a bit of your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. I'm excited to chat, and it's not Fecal Friday yet, so can't wish you a happy Fecal Friday. And just so people know, that's where I talk about issues about gut health, and it's just for fun. So it's not too wild, but I love that stuff. So I'm glad you picked up on that.
Oh man, yeah. When I first started following your content and I saw that pop up, and I was like, no, is this? Yeah, the title made me laugh, and then I was like, and the content's legit. So this is a great way. Make it memorable.
I love combining, I love combining like lightheartedness or humor with science. I think I probably did better in it earlier in my career when maybe I was a little bit, that little bit younger, have that youthfulness. When you get a little more mature, you're a little more conservative with like, how if you don't want to seem unprofessional and so on. But I think there's room for combining science with a little bit of fun. That's for sure, especially in this day and age.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a bit more about so how do you get into being a dietitian? Kind of what started?
Yeah, for me, it was like a really cliche story where in my teenage years, I didn't really care much about nutrition. I didn't think anything about what I ate, which basically means I just ate a lot of fun stuff, right? Candy for lunch and this and that. And it's not that, my parents didn't teach me well or anything. It's just that, they were very, very nice, very relaxed, and they kind of let me do my thing. But unfortunately, me doing my thing just led me to I was actually very underweight growing up. I had a lot of skin issues and just wasn't like living my best life. So I kind of found nutrition in soccer, which is like a big passion of mine at the same time. And I just rode that wave to a better life, essentially. And what I realized, though, in that process is that eating well can change your life, number one. But number two, it's very hard to understand what that means for someone. So, and it took me longer than it should have as a result. A lot of ups and downs. Maybe, I had to go through certain struggles as one would, trying to figure it out for themselves. So I kind of always knew that, number one, I wanted to use food to help people change their life. And I just wanted to make the process easier than if they did it alone. So that's how I got here.
Gotcha. Okay. In that early phase, can you dig a bit more into like what some of the things you were experiencing? So you said you had skin issues and things like that. Like obviously a lot of people can relate. My wife is an esthetician, a medical esthetician, and she's really seen an uptick in like acne and other things like that people are dealing with.
Yeah, I had really, really bad acne. I had really oily skin to the point where I remember working a summer job and I would show up and I would like touch my nose, it'd be oily. And, it's just not, it's tough. It's really tough. That was a tough time. That's relatively easy compared to other people's struggles. So I appreciate that. But for me, that was really hard. And that really affected me. I was very underweight, low muscle mass, not really like very athletic. Right. So it was just a combination of all those things. I just realized that, I guess at the end of the day, I wasn't very happy. And I just knew I needed to make a change. I was fortunate enough that I kind of discovered soccer. And then in many ways, my love for soccer led me to actually care about nutrition, because obviously there's an interconnection between those two things. Right. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. With my wife and I were actually talking about this the other day, the struggle with, typically in society, we're focused on those who are overweight, and that's the struggle for them. But it can make us really insensitive to the people who are underweight and the struggle that they go through as well. What is that? For like a guy, what's that like? Kind of, can you give us a peek into the mind, maybe some improved empathy and things like that from that?
Yeah, it's, everyone has their own experience and their own journey, I guess. And even the term underweight in many ways can be relative, right? I think for me, what that really meant is that, I just did not, I just looked frail and I felt frail, right? And ultimately I lived like that for quite a while until I realized that I could do something about it. And, and I do have that extra bit of rapport when I work with, especially, And people can be underweight for various reasons. Like sometimes it can be people like me who just didn't really know what they were doing, never cared about nutrition. And of course, there can be more serious reasons, around eating disorders and stuff like that. That's a bit of a different topic. So I'll put that, I'll leave that aside. There are people who spend their whole career talking about that. But yeah, for me, I find particularly in my practice as well, over the last 10 years, I have worked with a lot of younger guys or even older guys who want to gain muscle and want to get, bigger and stronger. And obviously there's a level of pressure around that, I think, for guys, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm good at what I do for various reasons, but one of them is that I do have, in that particular demographic, I have that extra bit of rapport and understanding of the experience where I can combine the professional side with the human side, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So soccer was the big thing. And I mean, you still play today.
Yeah, I've got a match tonight. And the thing is this, I never played soccer at a very high level. I more or less taught myself how to play. And I'm a decent player. I don't play at a super high level or anything like that. So it just goes to show, sports or whatever physical activity manifestations one can find, they can be valuable. You don't have to be the best at them to get a lot of value out of it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that speaks to a key component of just when it comes to exercise and taking care of yourself, being able to find things that you really enjoy and connect with that you can do over the long haul.
100%.
Absolutely. Cool. Do you play as part of like a league, or is there a lot of pickup and stuff like that?
It's a bit of everything. Depends on the time of the year, but definitely a bit of everything.
Nice.
Play, sometimes I make my own teams, sometimes I join other people's teams, sometimes just pick up, sometimes just training at the park with my friends. It's a bit of, I watch a lot of soccer. I like to joke that if someone wants to have a really robust conversation with me, we can talk about nutrition, we can talk about soccer, but then after that it starts to go downhill a little bit in terms of my expertise. But I know a lot about those two subjects. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. Cool. How did you land on kale? Obviously there's kale behind you in the on the picture. I've seen in your posts, you've got t-shirts, you got, just kale is big for you. Like why kale? A lot of people may look at it and say, that is not the vegetable for me, but why? What brought you to it?
Well, first I'll say, nutrition is a game of many things, including a game of to each their own.
Yeah.
So just because, I think kale is great. I think the nutritional value is high. I really like it. I like the texture.
Yeah.
How I got into it is kind of funny. It's very tied in with my origin story, let's call it, right? So when I was first figuring out how I was going to improve my diet, I was in my teenage years and I didn't know how to cook or anything. So I needed easy solutions. So a solution I landed on was just to eat raw leafy greens, those boxes of spinach, those boxes of spring mix. And I would have that with a bell pepper because I look at the Canadian food guide. The food guide says you should have one green and then one orange vegetable or one colorful vegetable a day, the old food guide. And maybe the new one says this too. I don't really look at the food guide, not because it's not good, but just because, I'm just advanced that. In terms of, I'm past that in terms of my knowledge. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, I landed on that.
Yeah.
And eventually a friend of mine said, hey, you should try kale instead of spinach. Or instead of these other leaf greens. And I started eating kale and I like the thickness of it. I like the waves and the structure, the crunchiness. And just eating raw kale and bell peppers was just an easy way for me to get vegetables every day. And that's just genuinely how it all started. And I wasn't afraid to share my my love for kale. And now as I get older and I see more information, then I see kale actually I didn't even appreciate this back then, but the calcium in kale is more absorbable by the body than cow's milk. That's a fun fact. And number two is kale is the single highest source of these specific compounds called lutein and zeaxanthin, which actually concentrate in our eye and protect our eye from blue light. So those are some fun facts about the nutritional value of kale, but those aren't the reasons why I got into it. I got into it just idiosyncratically, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You posted about that recently, actually, about the effects of kale on the eye. Yeah. Okay. With your journey into nutrition, when you got attached to soccer, how did your, family structure, your upbringing, relationship with food and stuff like that kind of factor into it? Was it just some from home, or was it external forces that were really influencing you?
Yeah, I think that what's definitely true is in the past, now it's been a while now since that transformation occurred, but I remember in the past, my family members would comment, I remember when you started to care about this stuff, or I remember, and so that's kind of funny. It's funny to hear that. And I think for me, I like to think hopefully I have had a net positive influence on how my family looks at food and nutrition. because of my own journey. But, back then, I think my parents were supportive of my desires to do things differently, but I didn't even know what I was doing. That's the biggest problem, is that, and which I kind of alluded to earlier, is that it can be really hard when you start from zero to understand what it is to eat really well. Because I just didn't have any background. It's not that my parents never provide healthy food or anything like that. And it was nothing like that. It was probably just more so I was interested in eating more fun stuff and less nutritious stuff. And that's what it was, right? It was a really up and down journey from the day I started to care about food to the day I had a full peace and tranquility around nutrition. That was quite many years, right? I would hyperfixate or I would care too much about stuff that didn't matter, like a little bit of salt here, a little bit of salt there. And, it's tough. It's tough because you have good intentions, but you don't have a full understanding to approach the topic with the level of comprehension that you need. And that's why I love my job so much, because I know someone sat down in front of me, I can really condense their journey. It's a long journey no matter what, but I can condense it and make it a little bit less painful. Yeah. Right? Painful in quotes, like not necessarily literally painful. Gotcha. But
Yeah. When I was doing a little bit of research, I saw that there's a season, I guess, in this period where you were figuring out, what nutrition was and kind of getting your bearings, that you went through like a PowerBar phase.
Yeah, I did actually. I did. I wasn't fully aware that I put that somewhere. I probably wrote that in a blog. I did. Exactly. I had a phase where I would look at PowerBars. I don't think they even exist anymore, as far as I know. But I would look at PowerBars, and this is how let's say infantile my knowledge was, or how new I was. I was like, oh, look at all the nutrients in this thing. This thing has to be like the best thing ever. Let me just eat multiple of these a day, right? So you're absolutely right, and that's where I started from. Literally, it's not to say bars and stuff are bad or they don't have a role to play. Of course they do, but that's where I started from. Yeah, it's a great point, and I can remember that pretty fondly. But I can tell you on listening, the answer to your best health is probably not eating 3 or 4 bars a day. Even though if you really like that stuff, you can certainly have a couple.
Absolutely.
That's funny though. Props for that.
For anybody listening, I mean, help them understand why. So if you look at the back of a protein, the PowerBar or any type of bar, if you're a novice, you're like, okay, it does have a lot of nutrients listed, benefits. Why can't I eat a bunch of these a day and it'd be fine? Did you experience, any, I guess, adverse effects? Or looking back, how would you inform somebody now to say, it looks good, but here are the things that you're not considering if you...
It's a really, really good question. And I think the best answer is that food is a lot more than just vitamins and minerals. You know what I mean? You need to get... and even just protein. You need protein, you need fiber, you need antioxidants, and some vitamins and minerals have antioxidant capabilities, but there's some of the most beneficial compounds in foods, things like polyphenols, flavonoids. Like, these are not vitamins or minerals, but they're like the next best thing. And they have these anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effects, and they feed our gut bacteria. And they're found in nuts and fruits and vegetables. So it's true, but you could say the same thing about why not just take a multivitamin and eat whatever you want. Right. And it's for the same kind of reasons. You need to eat, you need to get enough energy. You need to feel full after a meal. You need to eat in a way that makes your gut bacteria happy. And, a power bars, which again, I don't even think they exist anymore as far as I've seen. They're pretty much just, it's pure. It's essentially a bunch of like sticky, sugary stuff with some vitamins in there. Right. And when you think about all these wonderful food groups we have, like beans and fish and whole grains and nuts and fruits and vegetables, of course, and plant proteins and red meat and there's a lot more to those foods than just can be captured by a vitamin and mineral label.
Absolutely. Okay. So you mentioned something in there, polyphenols and flavonoids. I'm 10 years old. What are those?
Yeah, well, I would say they're these wonderful things that give fruits and vegetables primarily their color, right? So if something looks blue, it's because it has certain polyphenol or flavonoid compounds that are reflecting the blue light. I may not say that to a 10-year-old, but essentially they make the food have its color, and they make it visually appealing and stimulating for us to see and think that, oh, wow, this is a beautiful item. Maybe I should eat this. Right? I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but I think that's a good way to explain it. And then, of course, our body reaps the benefits, because all of these different colors, these different compounds, they do different things in our body, right? And they're all generally good. And they can all be generally simplified as being antioxidant or anti-inflammatory, but there's quite a bit more than that. They do things that are really fine level, and different ones do different things, of course.
Okay, gotcha. One thing that is, at least seems to be a bit of a mystery, it has been to me for a long time, and then for other people that I know, is inflammation. So you said anti-inflammatory properties. Can you help us understand inflammation and how would something be anti-inflammatory?
Yeah.
So inflammation in the body.
That's a great question. So, I mean, there's different types of inflammation. So let's start with that. I mean, there's acute inflammation, like someone's really ill or someone gets like some injury, right? And blood is rushing to the site. So that's one type. The type that we're talking about here is more what they call like chronic low-grade inflammation, which just basically means that, and I guess we start with the baseline assumption that this type of inflammation chips away at our health over time. And for example, one way it does this is that even if you think about insulin and insulin resistance and blood sugar, right? So on a basic level, you have your cells, and then you have insulin, and insulin binds to the cells to open up the cells to let sugar come in. And that's one way that we regulate our blood sugar levels. Now, inflammation can actually block insulin from binding to its receptor. So that's like one example of like a much bigger topic. So inflammation can affect how our hormones work. Okay. It can obviously damage our cells, affect how our cells work with energy. It can age us. It can age our skin. It can age us internally. And to speak about an anti-inflammatory diet, what that means is that if we look at these markers of inflammation, and there's different blood markers, like there's blood markers for cholesterol, there's blood markers for blood sugar, and there's markers for inflammation. And an anti-inflammatory diet is one that science has showed us if we eat more of these foods, these inflammatory markers, which indicate this low-grade inflammation, we have good reason to believe they'll go down, which means that our bodies is less inflamed, right? So it's an oversimplification, but that would be the easiest way to describe it.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's helpful. Because it's easily one of those things where you hear it, and then again, we still think more acute inflammation, and it's hard to kind of wrap our mind around, okay, well then what's long-term? Like I don't see any redness, I don't necessarily have some of the indicators of acute that we associate with it.
Yep.
Okay. No, that's helpful.
I was going to say, I mean, and inflammation can arise from so many different ways, from like the environment. It can arise from eating foods that raise our blood sugars too quickly, right? It can arise from not eating in a way, like our gut bacteria can produce inflammatory or anti-inflammatory compounds depending on how healthy and balanced it is. So how does our diet influence our gut bacteria? So it's such a massive world and massive topic, and very often it gets oversimplified, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. But there's a lot that really goes into it. But it is a real concept, and it's a relevant concept too.
Okay. What should people be on the lookout for as far as oversimplification in the negative realm? What should people kind of keep an eye out for and ear out for?
I think that the idea that, if you talk about inflammation, the idea that, this one anti-inflammatory thing is going to resolve all of your issues, or that fixing inflammation comes down to one step or one food. Because I said earlier, nutrition is a game of to each their own. Nutrition is also a game of averages. So the state that your body ends up, as it is affected by your diet, is based on the totality of what you do over time, right? So I think that's really important. So anything involving quick fixes or over attributing one thing to your whole health, whether that's inflammation or insulin resistance or whatever else it is, the body is complicated. It's interconnected, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on. So it's rarely that there's just this one thing that explains everything.
Yeah. Okay. Good. In your practice, so you've been in your private practice
10 years,
for about 10 years now? Okay. What were you doing before?
So I was working at Diabetes Canada in like the research and education department, which basically means I was writing articles, I was editing stuff. I work closely with the Diabetes Canada practice guidelines, which basically bring together all of the best guidance into a document, which is then kind of sold or provided to healthcare professionals who are trying to enhance their knowledge in that area, right? It's also a lot of it's available online as well, and it just gives you best practices, right, on how to manage blood sugar levels for people living with diabetes.
Okay. How did you get started there? Was it just the next natural step out of school, or did you have a particular passion for, wanting to learn more about diabetes?
Yeah, it was simply that I did a placement there as part of my master's degree. and I guess they liked what I was about, and so they brought me on after I graduated. That's all it was. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And from there, I kind of meandered my way into doing my own thing. Yeah.
Yeah. What did that look like?
It looked like some job rejections. It looked like some months where I was, where I wasn't sure if I was going to make it, stuff like that. That's what it looked like.
Okay.
For sure. But really, it started off with a free website on Wix, a lot of blogs, and that's how I got into social media, quite frankly. Is in my head, like, I don't write as much as I used to, which is kind of sad to say, and because things have changed for the last 10 years, obviously, right, with AI and social media and so on. But my vision was always,
right.
I was always going to use writing to kind of propel my career, and for a large part I did, because I was able to write a lot of books and use my blog posts to become more intelligent, also to have content to give people to read, and those people could become my clients. Like, that was the vision that I started with, and it worked pretty well for me.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, so why you were working with Diabetes Canada? Like, why the shift? What caused the shift into your?
Yeah, I think it was just a contract. It was a contract position, so I think the contract was up, and what had happened was, I think other people who graduated in my year, I was the first one to get a full-time position, I guess, or a contract position. But then by the time the contract was done, I think everyone else was employed elsewhere, and there was less job opportunities. I think that's how it played out. It's oversimplification, but it basically played out like that. And I kind of knew in the back of my head, I always wanted to have an office where I would talk to people about nutrition. Like, that was my dream, essentially, or my dual dream was to, like, yes, use writing, yes, to become a known quantity, but then also I wanted to have a private place where I would talk to people about nutrition. Like, those were my two dreams, essentially, which I kind of live out now, essentially, right? So yeah, that's it. It was a necessity. It became the best possible option. It was just after getting rejected for a job I didn't even want, where that was the last straw. And yeah, that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes.
Okay. All right. Is entrepreneurship common in your family, or are you like the first?
I would say it is moderately common. I mean, there's definitely a few people in my immediate family who have done their own thing, but it's not everyone. It's not like right, left, and center.
Okay.
It's there. It's there, but it's not. Yeah, it's not universal.
Gotcha. Okay. Were you able to learn from any of those family members, either by observation at a distance or, more direct conversations and things like that?
I think observation, and not because I didn't have the ability to ask questions, don't get me wrong. I think it's observation from a distance, just understanding the hard work that's involved, the hours that are involved, that client interactions can sometimes go really well and sometimes not go as well, and being able to just roll up the punches and keep fighting. I think those are things that I've learned without ever maybe asking to be taught them, but just observing them over time passively.
Okay. Gotcha. As a business owner now and having done it for 10 years, what's your mindset regarding rest as a business owner? Yeah, well, I guess the term rest, I guess, is relative to the individual. I mean, I'm getting older, so I can't get away with not sleeping well. So that's definitely true. But rest for me means grocery shopping, eating well, getting my sports or my yoga or my exercise. That's my rest, right? To do that is a key part of my of my happiness, essentially. Right, it allows me to do my best work. Yeah, and I would swap an hour of sleep to cook my own meal or to do something else. So, and I know that rest doesn't mean sleep alone. And yeah, I feel like I've always kind of run a 6-day work week, which gives me the flexibility on any given day to work less hours or to take a day off here and there. So that's obviously one of those cliche, pros of like working for yourself, or you make your own schedule, which, unless you've come up with like some amazing self-run business idea, that what that really means is that, you're working, quite a lot, which is definitely the case for me. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What is running your business? How does it differ now than it did, in the early years?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the big changes for sure is less writing. I mean, writing was such a big part of my career, multiple books, constantly writing my blog, doing paid writing for all sorts of platforms. I think that's definitely tapered off, and it's more making videos, making courses, making graphics, using AI to enhance my learning, right? I think it's harder for me to justify writing when, as pains me to say it, there's probably more concise, and you're competing for attention, so you have to deliver message concisely and efficiently. I think there are just more efficient ways to do that. And I think that, I probably don't have not to say I don't have the same zest, but I have a little bit less zest and energy than I did 10 years ago. I'm older. It's just the way it is. I'm not going to have that exact same energy that I did when I was younger. So I'm maybe one level less efficient in a way. So I have to be more clever with how I do things. If I had to answer the question on a whim, that's what I would say.
Okay. No, that's helpful. I mean, one of the things that I'm exploring myself, but then also it's interesting to hear from different business owners how they're navigating, their business differences and how they ran it when they were younger versus now. Maybe adjustments that they would tell somebody newer to make now that they have experience and say, hey, I did it this way. I wouldn't do it that way now, knowing what I know. Any tips like that?
Well, okay. So, you definitely broke that down well. Okay. So first of all, I mean, I see way more people online than in person, right? Old days, all in person. COVID obviously changed that, but I keep my office. Right. I keep my office because personally, working from home, not interested. COVID kind of ruined it for me. I'm fortunate enough to have an office space that I with a good location at a reasonable price point, so I can justify it. So that's, for me, that's a personal thing. So that's me just being essentially true to myself, knowing what I need, and that. But from
need the personal interaction.
Yeah, I mean, and there's many clients I have who they come see me. I mean, I like to think it's more than just this. Obviously, it is, but they're like, I just want to talk to somebody in person, and there's something to that, right? There is a beautiful rapport. I mean, you can make rapport in either situation, obviously, but there's something about in-person interaction, the energy and like the hand motions that I'm really, that you can just like really, because a big part of my job is getting people enthusiastic and optimistic about the path ahead. And I can translate that probably better in person, although I do it well. I like to think I do it well in any setting, but that's a big part of what I do, right? Because these days with AI, you can just make a meal plan. AI is pretty good. And I'm not condoning that, nor am I saying is it perfect at all, but it's not, you have to be honest. Like, I mean, AI is not bad, right? It's relatively clever. A lot of things that I know, when I ask AI about it, it gives pretty good answers. Anyway, that's an aside. The other thing, what I did when I started is I was a generalist. Which is to say, I tried to help everyone, right? And at that time, when the marketplace wasn't as saturated, when social media wasn't as big as it is now, that worked. And it benefited me because it allowed me to acquire a really broad knowledge base. And as I said earlier, the human body's connected. So all these, even though there's distinct issues that happen in the body, they are all related to each other. So if you know stuff about different areas, you will be a better practitioner, right? You'll be able to have better conversations. You'll be able to make better content. However, right now, it's very competitive. It's very saturated. And I think unless you have something really special about you, like you're like a doctor, PhD, the most fit, best looking person in the world, and no matter what you say, you're going to get attention. You're going to need to specialize. You know what I mean? You're going to have to speak to a very specific audience, because it's just too hard to compete otherwise. So those are some pieces of advice I would give.
Gotcha. Okay. Is that how you, obviously you had the early background in diabetes care, but is that how you started to make a shift towards like fatty liver as well? And
exactly.
Like
a couple of years ago, I kind of thought, what, I want in on the specialist game. I want people to know me as someone who knows a little bit more about something than others. But the reason I chose fatty liver is partially that, but partially because like I said, I pride myself on having a broad knowledge base and knowing a lot of different stuff. Now, fatty liver is quite common. It affects like 1 in 3 people, which means it's a really good proxy, because I have this nutrition philosophy and this vision for what I think optimal nutrition looks like. And if I just speak generally, I'm saying, okay, hey, this is just the best for you. Trust me, this is the best. You're going to live longer. But with fatty liver, I take that same philosophy and, hey, now you have fatty liver. You want to reduce the fat in your liver. You want to improve your blood markers. And by the way, again, it's very common. So it's a captive audience. Here's how you do it. Here's the evidence for it. So it allows me to like translocate my vision, my philosophy to a more captive audience. So that's ultimately why I made that change.
Okay. Okay. So, wow, 1 in 3. I didn't know it was that high. Is it similar in Canada versus the US?
There's always a little bit more of everything going on in the US in terms of metabolic health. So, but I've seen data by 2050,
Right.
4 in 10 adults will have it. Now, not everybody knows they have it. That's the other thing as well, right? But the technology will be more and more forthcoming.
Right.
Like the FDA, which is the the American, organization that approves drugs.
Yeah. Food and Drug
They just
Association.
accelerate the approval for Wegovy for advanced fatty liver. So it's clear that this is a big topic and it's only going to get bigger. And so that's why I want to be a part of it. But it's also very reversible, and it's also really it's such a good fit for me and how I view nutrition, really. So that's how I got into it.
Okay. Wait, did you say Wegovy? I mean, I know about Wegovy, but is there a fatty liver specific version of it?
No, it's not that specific version. It's more so that they have specific data in that population that actually
Gotcha.
there's a benefit for its use, right? And fatty liver is really getting on people's radars more the last 10, 20 years. So then you have this condition that's surging up. There's not a lot of options for it. And so then you get into that kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. So for people who are wondering, what is fatty liver? One, I guess we start there.
So it's exactly what it sounds like. Essentially what it is, your liver cells start to store fat, and they're not supposed to. Okay. That's it, right? And it happens we'll talk about how it happens, but simple as that. Your liver starts to store fat, and it's not supposed to store fat. Fat is supposed to be stored elsewhere in the body. It's supposed to be used for energy to make hormones. It's not supposed to be stored in your liver. The problem is, if it's stored in your liver, there's two things that are a problem. First of all, it means that there's certain systems in your body that aren't working properly, okay? And that if they continue to not work properly, there's worse things coming, like diabetes, like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, certain types of cancer. The risk of all those things goes up, right? So things are not going well. And number two, it's that once fat is there, it can damage the liver over time the more it gets. So fat accumulation leads to inflammation, which leads to scarring and damage. So we talked about inflammation earlier, how inflammation damages our cells. Well, it can damage the liver. It can lead to something called fibrosis, and then the blood doesn't flow through the liver as well. It doesn't function the same way, right? And the liver performs a lot of roles in the body. It purifies the blood. It creates hormones. It stores vitamins and minerals. So we want those functions to be working, right?
Yeah. So fibrosis, is that simply just like inflamed fibers of the liver?
As an oversimplification, fibrosis is essentially scarring of the liver that occurs due to excessive inflammation over time that just hasn't been addressed.
Okay. You mentioned that so a fatty liver, is that usually a precursor to diabetes, or does it sometimes come after?
Fatty liver is getting diagnosed younger and younger in men, right? So that's one thing. But I think that people with type 2 diabetes are way higher risk of fatty liver disease because there's a lot of overlap, right? So there's two things can be true. Yeah. If you have type 2 diabetes, the chance you're going to end up with a fatty liver is much higher than the average person. And if you have a fatty liver, the chance you're going to end up with type 2 diabetes is much higher than the average person. So both things are true.
Okay, because of some of those other systems that are not functioning properly, they can both lead
100%. And part of it is, did you go to the doctor? Did you get blood work? Did you get a liver scan? You know what I mean? If you didn't get those things, you're not going to know that you had a fatty liver. I mean, it's probably safe to say that type 2 diabetes is easier to diagnose because it's based on more simple blood work, whereas fatty liver, probably you should get an ultrasound or a fibro scan, and then you have to also look at blood work. So it can be a little bit more complicated to diagnose, I think. So I'm not explaining it away with that, but I think there's some truth to that.
Yeah. No, okay. That's good. And something for me to look into here in the States as well to see since type 2 diabetes is easier to diagnose and simpler blood tests, if there are potential barriers to people finding out if they have fatty liver disease because of the extra testing that might be needed, or not knowing what to ask the doctor to look for, if they need additional testing that's not included in there.
It's a relevant question to ask. I think it is true though that you can see the FDA is approving new drugs for this purpose. Like, it's obviously on the medical radar, right? So I think that's going to be less and less of a problem as time goes on. I would guess there's going to be more and more fibro scans available. A fibro scan is just it's kind of a special type of ultrasound to measure liver fat and liver scarring, or liver fibrosis rather. So it is the best thing to get to fully understand if you have liver fat storage and scarring and how much you have, right? So my best case scenario, if I'm working with someone, we're going to get a fibro scan early in the process, just a 5-minute scan. You can probably get it done in Canada, in Toronto, you can get it done privately for $100 Canadian, which is probably 50, 60 American, something like that. And then you get another one done 3 months later or 6 months later, and you evaluate the difference. And that's the best indicator. And there's some blood work that helps to predict liver health too, like triglycerides is a big one. But yeah.
Okay. So it's probably best practice to get those checked, ask for it, and look, because if you're looking into, like, let's say, are there symptoms that people might experience if they have fatty liver?
Great question. So there's not really, the main symptom is fatigue. And that's a very broad symptom, right? So it's basically if you're not feeling feeling your best, you know what I mean? But in terms of like basic blood work, probably the most predictive blood work for fatty liver, if you're talking about basic blood work, nothing advanced, triglycerides are high and HDL, which is the good cholesterol, is low. That's a bad sign. Those two being out of range, one too low, one too high, the likelihood that person has fatty liver is pretty good. And not to mention the fact that their liver enzymes are elevated too, and maybe they're on the heavier side, then at that point, it's the fact that you have fatty liver, it's pretty much guaranteed. It's just like how much fat is stored in there, how bad is it, and and that's it. So insulin resistance, which requires some like different blood work, which not everyone will get, is a great predictor as well. And so is blood sugar, because especially in women, blood sugar is also a good predictor of liver health, especially in postmenopausal women, because as the estrogen levels decrease, we become less sensitive to insulin, and that leads to other blood sugar management problems and fatty liver and so on.
Okay, gotcha. So you mentioned that fatty liver is on the rise, especially in young men. Is it also on the rise in women?
It is. I think some of the data I looked at is that and this is like the fastest growing demographic, right? So it's on the rise, carte blanche, like across the board. Okay. Yeah. But if you had to pick a demographic in men, it's like 20 to 30 is the fastest growing demographic. I think for women, it's being diagnosed later around the menopause demographic, which makes sense based on what I just said. So that's where but for men, it is more common in men, and it is actually a big risk factor for low testosterone. Having fatty liver disease is one of the strongest predictors of low testosterone levels in men.
Why is
that? It's a great question. I mean, there's a lot to it. Part of it is because of what fatty liver comes with. And what fatty liver comes with is insulin resistance, imbalances in the gut bacteria, excessive inflammation, and all three of these things influence how our body makes hormones. Okay, so that would be an oversimplified response. Okay, and we talked about earlier, remember inflammation, how it affects insulin signaling, and that's a hormone. So you can imagine that's only one microcosm, right? That extends to other hormones as well.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So with fatty liver, how you said it's reversible? How? Like, what are some first steps that people should take if they find out?
I would say, first of all, if you're not really moving your body at all, start walking 150 minutes a week or more. Brisk walk, 150 minutes a week or more. Okay. Cardiovascular activity, like resistance training, we know is important. No secrets there. But cardiovascular activity has been demonstrated to be more useful if the main goal is to lower liver fat. So in the short term, you could get more return on investment from cardio, and that could be as little as walking 150 minutes a week. If you can do more robust physical activity, even better. So I would start there. Physical activity, really, really important. Then we talk about, to talk about supplements briefly, I mean, the two most well-studied supplements for liver health, for fatty liver, are omega-3s and probiotics. Now, many people with a fatty liver, they have imbalances in their gut bacteria. Now, what happens is blood flows through your digestive system and goes to your liver next. So the state of your gut bacteria dictates the state of your liver. If your gut microbiome is out of balance, you have a long history of antibiotic use, your diet has been poor for an extended period of time, you're going to be in that category. It means your gut bacteria is making harmful compounds, and your blood is carrying them to the liver. Now, the liver can handle that, but it gets overloaded over time. When it gets overloaded, an inflammatory response starts, right? And then you see all the fun and games can come from there, right? So, okay, so probiotic omega-3. Most people do not consume much fish, which is salmon, sardines, trout, herring, mackerel. These are the omega-3s, fatty acids. Omega-3s help our body do many things, including to use fat the way it should be. Because ultimately, fatty liver disease is a condition whereby your body is not using fat the way it should, because it's storing it in the liver where it's not supposed to be. Eating enough omega-3, which many people don't, so why supplementing it is useful, helps our body to do that for a variety of reasons, because omega-3s have to do with signaling and telling our body where to do things. They go in our cell membranes and all sorts of stuff like that. They're also anti-inflammatory. They make us more sensitive to insulin. They lower triglycerides, all this stuff that actually is directly tied in, right? So if I had to recommend supplements, I would say those two are the most well-studied. And on the nutrition side, there's a lot of different things one can do, but if I had to name my philosophy, it's what I call a high-polyphenol Mediterranean diet, okay? Which basically means two things. First of all, Mediterranean diet, it means this: eat more fish, eat more beans, eat more nuts, more or less. And obviously eat more fruits and vegetables if you aren't already, right? That's what the Mediterranean diet is. High polyphenol means to, where we can, to choose foods in these categories that are higher in polyphenols. So for example, berries are generally higher polyphenol fruits, as is citrus. Artichoke, asparagus, onions, broccoli are higher polyphenol vegetables. For nuts, we have hazelnuts and pecans and almonds are higher polyphenol, right? And so again, polyphenols, which we talked about, just these anti-inflammatory, antioxidant compounds that, by the way, our gut bacteria also like. So those would be some snippets of things I would throw at someone if they had fatty liver and they just want some quick advice to get started.
Okay. When people are engaging in the physical activity, what at high level is taking place in the body that signals to the liver to start removing the fat?
Yeah. Well, there's actually a lot of overlap in terms of physical activity activates certain proteins in the body. Okay. And these proteins allow our cells to, for example, pull sugar out of our cell more readily, which lowers our blood sugar levels, right? It changes the way in which our liver, and just to walk it back for a second, because of the interconnectedness of the body, like a simple change in, having more glucose receptors on our cells to pull more sugar from the blood, that has carryover effects because it stresses the liver less, because there's less getting sent to the liver for the liver to work with. So really, physical activity and different physical activities, different things, they activate all these different proteins, and there are all these different proteins in the body which are involved with how our body uses fat, how our body uses sugar, and there's a lot of layers to it. It's also not only just to mention the fact that it's less time spent sitting, right? Physical activity is a double whammy, because not only you're moving, you're spending less time sitting. So I would say for some of those reasons, basically.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. And I could see how, that makes sense. That makes sense. There's a family member of mine has fatty liver, and then another family member, reached out, like I mentioned before we started recording, and said, hey, please ask about this, because I know some folks who are struggling with this and whatnot. And neither of us knew that the level was, potentially so high in the population. But being able to be educated on it and know what to look for, and then simple steps that we can take to either prevent it or start the reversal 100%. Process. Really
actually, I want to give a slightly better answer, because the one thing that happens is when you constantly look at so much research, sometimes you forget. I want to give you a slightly better answer to the exercise question, okay? Because I have made content on it, so I just pulled it up right now, okay?
Okay.
So both cardio and weights are effective for fatty liver. And so you asked what happens in the body that makes these beneficial. Well, one thing that cardio does is it increases the expression of a protein called PPAR, Okay. And what PPAR does is it encourages fat to be stored in fat cells instead of liver cells. So it pushes free fatty acids in the blood into fat cells. So it means less get delivered to the liver, reduces the likelihood they're going to get stored in the liver. So that's something that cardio has been demonstrated to do. Weights, for example, are known to activate a protein called AMPK. And what AMPK does, it reduces fat production in the liver and increases fat breakdown in the liver. So again, there's less fat floating around, lower risk it's going to get stored where it's not supposed to be. So that's a slightly better answer. I was pulling for those in my head, but I'm like, you know what? I forgot the finer details there.
No, that's good. That's good. And it helps give visuals too. Kind of demystify some of what's going on in our bodies when we're talking about this stuff. Okay. What would be, I guess, something that I was reading about in some of your work recently, and this kind of, I'm sure these are like connected in a sense, but jumping over to magnesium, you've written a lot recently about that. And when I reached out to you initially, it was like, hey, I've been reading about this and would like to come on and talk about it. What is magnesium? I guess for one, for people who don't know what it is, we start there, and then high level, what does it do for you?
So magnesium is a mineral in the same way that iron or calcium is a mineral, and it's underconsumed by a significant portion of the population. It's involved in hundreds of reactions in the body. Okay. So you have something that's underconsumed. It's involved. Plays a big role in the body. We have good evidence that magnesium intake goes up, fatty liver risk, diabetes, type 2 diabetes risk goes down. One of the many now on a basic level, magnesium is very anti-inflammatory, right? So that's cool. And part of it is because it's involved in reactions that produce anti-inflammatory compounds. And if there's not enough magnesium, the extent to which these reactions take place in the body goes down. Now, one of the cool things that magnesium does, and one of the reactions it's involved in, and this is actually a perfect tie-in because I talked earlier how inflammation can block insulin from binding the insulin receptor. Well, what magnesium does is once insulin binds the receptor, a bunch of reactions have to take place. Magnesium's involved in all of those reactions, okay? Because the ultimate goal when insulin binds on our cell is that somewhere else in the cell, doors open so sugar can come in, right? So that's ultimately what happens. Now, what magnesium does, it's involved in all these reactions, including the reaction that pushes more receptors to the surface of the cell to pull sugar. So our body responds much better to insulin and is much more effective at reducing sugar in the blood when we eat enough magnesium, right? So that would be one of the many reasons. And again, less sugar floating in the blood, healthier insulin response, less insulin resistance. Now, there's one point I want to add. Many people think about insulin, that it lowers blood sugar levels, but it also lowers blood fats, okay? So what happens is when we have insulin resistance, we have more fats flowing around in our bloodstream that gets sent to the liver. Now, fats in our bloodstream are toxic to the body, so the liver repackages them into a different form and sends them back out. But when too many get sent to the liver, it gets overwhelmed, and some of that fat gets stored. So that is the key point as to why like insulin resistance as a concept is it's the most universal driver of fatty liver disease, right? And high triglycerides triglycerides are that package. So when triglycerides go up, what it's saying is that your liver is working really hard to get rid of all this fat flowing around in the bloodstream. So hopefully that was a good connection there. And then beyond that, like magnesium is found in all those food groups I just talked about. It's found in fish. It's found in nuts. It's found in beans. It's found in leafy greens. So it's all these same foods that people generally don't eat enough of that are part of the Mediterranean diet, that are high in magnesium, right? So there you go.
Gotcha. Okay. So to make sure I understand, and for anybody else who may be tracking with this, so fats in the bloodstream, bad. They go to the liver repackages them as triglycerides, sends it back out to be utilized in a different way. But if too much fat is in the bloodstream, the factory, the liver gets overwhelmed. They can't process it effectively. It's not sending stuff out. Stuff starts to build up. The fat starts to build up in the liver.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Essentially. Okay. With magnesium, what are some of the other benefits that we reap from having enough magnesium in the body?
Well, magnesium helps to lower blood pressure. It plays a role in bone formation as well, right? Those are probably the two big ones, right? Because bone health and blood pressure are two really big concerns. So it helps with both of those things.
Absolutely. So if we're talking about menopausal women, magnesium, and with the drop in estrogen, there's usually also, bone issues, osteoporosis, and things like that. Magnesium can be really beneficial in helping them build and maintain, along with other stuff.
To be clear, the one of the big reasons I talk about magnesium a lot is because it's out there, so people are drawn to it, right? But really, the ultimate reality is to tell someone that magnesium is so good. Really, the real value of that is, yes, you get more magnesium, but magnesium is found in the most important and, in my opinion, the most underconsumed foods. Okay, so that's like, when you eat more magnesium, that's one of the benefits of all the other things you're getting when you eat fish, leafy greens, nuts, beans. So it's not just to say you're going to go supplement magnesium and all your problems are going to go away. It's that magnesium-rich foods are going to help you fill the gap you have in magnesium, and they're going to help you fill a bunch of other gaps too. For example, magnesium and fiber very often go together. Many foods that are high in magnesium are high in fiber too. Not all, but many are. And fiber is underconsumed too, right? So,
So like the nuts, the beans,
100%.
Different things like that.
Beans, nuts, leafy greens, whole grains. And these are all foods that get demonized right now for various reasons, right? So that's also part of it. But
you may not necessarily have an answer to this, but I know one of the things that's come up in conversations with other dietitians is the challenge sometimes when, and you've already kind of talked about, like, nutrition is kind of to each their own as well, and it's individualized. But so like the Mediterranean diet, how would somebody who doesn't necessarily like fish or stays away from beans or whatever, for whatever reason, maybe they're not like Mediterranean, but they have other cultural foods. How could they think about identifying the same components in some of their cultural foods so they don't have to shift to like a Mediterranean diet?
I think that there are tons of equivalents for sure. I think the best way probably really, is to get customized guides from a dietitian. But let me give you some equivalents, right? If you don't like fatty fish, salmon, sardines, trout, herring, mackerel, which these foods extend across, I think, quite a few cultures, but not everyone likes them. Easiest thing to do is supplement omega-3s, because there's no other way, right? You don't like beans, which also extend across many cultures as well. Closest thing to beans are things like quinoa, buckwheat, millet. Those are the things that have the most similarities. So these really like low glycemic index, high nutritional value starches. So those are two quick equivalents right off the top that I could give you.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's helpful. Because that is one of the things that, I'm sure you probably run into it as well. You can tell people like, okay, well, you need to eat these things. And they're like, I have no idea what, like, I've never eaten that as part of my culture. Why would
That's the joy of the job.
And you're like, okay, no, the goal is to help you.
I love that.
Solving those puzzles.
That's what makes the job fun, is to figure out, here are the pieces I have to solve this puzzle. What's the best that we can do? Everyone has different parameters. Like I said, we started with it. Good to close with it. Nutrition's a game of to each their own. Right. So my job is to give someone a vision for the best day in their life of eating on their terms, if I had to simplify what I do.
Okay. That's really good. One more question regarding magnesium. So in light of the foods that contain magnesium that also have a lot of other health benefits, another thing that's been on the rise in the U.S., maybe Canada as well, is various types of dementia. In what ways do magnesium-rich foods help and aid in, cognitive development, retention, longevity? Yeah,
well, I think an easy answer is that the body's connected. If we know that magnesium is underconsumed by the average person, then it's clear that the better your body's working, the more you give it what it needs, I think the more protected you'll be of anything that can go wrong, right? So there's definitely some evidence around magnesium intake being associated, I think, with like even like the volume in someone's brain, higher magnesium intake associated with better cognitive health. I mean, part of the easy answer for that is like if you have high blood sugar and your blood goes through your whole body, sugar damages your cells. Like there's a reason why having high blood sugar is bad. Is it damages your body. So that can include being problematic for your brain cells too, right? So it's about the interconnectedness of the body, or more than anything else, I think, as to why magnesium is important. And again, it's like magnesium is not special. It's just underconsumed. If people underconsume something else,
Right.
Like, you know, if someone already eats a high magnesium diet, they're not going to get a benefit from taking more magnesium. Realistically, there's going to be diminishing returns. It just happens that magnesium is under consumed.
Yeah.
And so it's worthwhile to focus on because we can provide tangible evidence to support it. And if I had to give someone basic advice, like, you know, if you get enough magnesium in your diet, there's a good chance you're going to get a lot of other stuff too. That's just how it works out. Okay. And if you get enough magnesium from enough different foods, you're almost inevitably going to have a strong diet. Because if you eat beans, nuts, leafy greens, fish, dark chocolate, whole grains every day, I mean, you know, that's a pretty strong pattern, right? Whereas you cannot say the same for that many other vitamins. Because if you say, oh, just get enough vitamin A, well, I can get enough vitamin A for one pack of carrots. You know what I mean? Get enough iron, well, I can get enough iron from one steak. I'm not necessarily going to get that diversity and strength in my diet in the same way. I mean, there's limitations to what I just said, but I think it's a decent analogy.
Yeah. You mentioned dark chocolate in there. I know when I read one of your recent blogs and looked at some other research as well, and I mentioned that to my wife, she was like, so I need to have more dark chocolate in the house? All right, I'm on board.
Dark chocolate's very high in polyphenols, very high in flavonoids, high in magnesium. Dark chocolate is a very unique food. It's good for the gut bacteria, good for mood. Obviously, you know, it's a big part of my own routine. So yeah, it's very fun.
Yeah. So when we say dark chocolate, how dark? So just
I think like the best evidence I've seen, usually the benefits are 85% plus, but I've even seen studies at 78%. So I would just say as dark as you can tolerate, because, you know, no one's out here trying to put something in their body on a regular basis that they hate, right? As a general rule, I'm not trying to tell people to eat something they hate. And you can live without dark chocolate if you don't like it. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of foods out there with nutritional benefits. Green tea is actually nutritionally kind of similar to dark chocolate. So that's a fun fact. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it has some of the similar flavonoid compounds that dark chocolate does.
Yeah. Okay. Before we wrap up, you've been on a journey, obviously, and you know, you mentioned earlier on that family sometimes references. I remember when you started on this journey, and you know, kind of what you were doing in that shift that took place. With your expertise now, do you have much influence, or you know, on your family as far as their, you know, positive nutrition changes, trajectory? Different things like that? Are they a hard audience or a you know, fairly receptive?
I would say. I mean, again, nutrition's a game of each their own, right? So I would say I have a limit. I have a limited to moderate influence. I definitely have some influence. There's no question. But a lot of the times, the reality is when you're on social media, when you're doing this stuff, you don't even know the influence you have, right? You know, I'll get message people randomly. Oh, hey, you know, I've been following your advice for the last 3 years. Thanks so much. You know, it's like I never talked to this person, never interact with this person. So the honest truth is I don't know the extent to which I do or don't have influence on some people in my life, you know, because it's not, I don't, you know, unless someone approaches me about it, I don't really give unsolicited advice unless I really think it's appropriate and there's going to be a high return on investment for the advice in the moment.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, if you feel comfortable answering this question, you know, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. It's a conversation that like I'm having, you know, within family, and other friends and family are having it as well as parents age and things like that. And if you're in like personal training or nutrition or, you know, the medical field, how do you navigate if you're having these thoughts right now, knowing that you could, or some of your knowledge could help improve the longevity or life of family members, but you know, you don't want to give unsolicited advice. You don't want to become overbearing. Kind of how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's funny because the first blog post I ever wrote was how to influence loved ones to eat better. And it was based on like the stages of change theory and behavior change research. And I think one of the things that you could do is to let someone know how important it is to you. Because if that person cares about you, values you, you're close to them, and then you say, this is like really important to me that you consider this. I think that's a very gentle way to get someone looking at something a little bit differently. And if you're also very clever, you could also give recommendations that you know will work for the person with a high degree of certainty. So they're not disruptive recommendations, and you know they'll be well received. But that's about knowing your audience and then obviously having the ability to give good advice. which, that's a very contextual basis.
Got it. Okay. That's a really important nugget, though, just the importance of knowing your audience and being humble enough to craft your message in a way that would be best received. That's really important. That's important. Just relational advice.
100%. 100%.
So, okay. Cool, man. Well, how can people connect with you, learn more about you?
These days it's all about Instagram, TikTok, Andy DRD. I'm on YouTube as well. I don't even know what my handle is, Andy DeSantis. I got 1,600 subscribers on there, so I'm trying to do my thing. I started late on some of this stuff, but Instagram is a good starting point. Andy DRD. That's where a lot of my best stuff is.
Okay, awesome. And then when this goes live, there'll be some opportunities to connect with Andy. He's got courses on fatty liver. He said he's got a lot of books. How many books?
I got 11 books over the last 10 years. I haven't written one for a few years now because writing is kind of going a different direction. But proud of the ones I wrote, and great chat today. Really appreciate it, Brian. A great host. Great questions. Good research as well. You definitely pulled up some stuff that I even forgot about. So I respect that.
Good deal, man. Good deal. Much appreciated. Thank you for your time. And
okay. Catch you.